I've got 7 wall drills that will quickly take you to 5.0, seriously. In just 3 minutes of wall drills, you'll get more reps than playing an entire game of pickleball. It's actually crazy that more people aren't doing this. We're covering everything from overheads all the way to dinks, and I'm going to give you my top 3 tips for every shot as we go. Like a lot of you, I don't have a tennis background, so when I started playing pickleball, my overheads were really bad. But to be a 5.0, you have got to get good at hitting overheads. This is how you do that. To start this drill, just toss the ball up and then smash it into the ground, and you're trying to aim somewhere right before the wall. Anywhere from like here to here is going to be okay, because the ball's going to hit the ground and then bounce up off the wall and then give you an opportunity for another overhead. Now, when you're starting out, you're probably not going to be able to hit a lot of these in a row, but as you get better, you'll be able to do more of these consistently and get longer and longer rallies. I actually think that practicing overheads on the wall like this might be better than practicing it in the court, because when you're hitting on the wall like this, you have to aim for a very specific location. And you'll see in some of these clips, if you don't hit this exact spot, then the ball is not going to come back to you and give you another chance for an overhead. The first tip for the overhead is to point at the ball as it's coming towards you. Now, sometimes I don't do this perfectly, but at least get close enough, because this arm is up in the air. It's what's going to start the motion of your overhead. So if this arm is not up here, you can't generate as much power as you otherwise could. Also, when you point to the ball, then that ball is going to get closer to your finger, and it gives you a guideline. So you know that whenever that ball gets, so close to your finger, then you can actually execute the smash. The next tip is to turn your hips to the side. So a lot of people try to hit overheads with their hips facing their target, and the problem here is you can't generate a lot of power, because most of the power does come from your hips and your core when you're hitting these overheads. So instead, you want to turn to the side, maybe not all the way, but definitely slightly that direction. That way you can throw your hips towards your target as you finish. And then finally, at the top of your stroke, make sure you're snapping your wrist. So your wrist stays cocked back like this, and then at the very top of the stroke, you snap your wrist forward. And because of this, your paddle head speed is going to be going really fast, and that generates a lot more power. And if you can get good at controlling where your wrist goes, you can generate a lot of angles from this as well. If you want to win points faster, this drill is for you. So for this drill, you're going to need 2 pieces of tape. First, just walk up to the wall, put the first piece of tape right around your right hip, maybe slightly above, and the second piece of tape right around your left shoulder or slightly above. Now what this does is this mimics your opponent's right shoulder and left hip. So when you're targeting people in pickleball with a speed up, you want to generally aim for these 2 areas. First, the right shoulder, because most people hold their paddle with a continental grip. This area of their body is really awkward. And secondly, this left hip, if people tend to shade towards their right side or they have the wrong grip, then covering their left hip also is really awkward. So when you're doing this drill, there's 2 ways you can do it. Number 1, you could just drop the ball out of your hand and then lightly speed up at one of these 2 targets. Now the point here is to hit the ball lightly. If you hit the ball too hard, they could just move and get out of the way and that ball would be out. Really, anytime you're speeding up, it's more about placement than power, and that's why we have 2 targets here. The other way to do this drill is to speed up against the wall and then let the ball bounce and then continue to speed up. We'll cover dinks later, but you could also hit a dink and then hit a speed up and then a dink and then a speed up. But really, your primary focus for this drill is just to make sure that you're hitting as close to these targets as you possibly can, and that you're not hitting the ball super hard, but you're placing it very well. The 3 tips for this drill: number 1, keep your paddle tip down as you're speeding up. When your paddle tip is down, you can really hit the ball wherever you want to hit it. So from this same position, I could hit to the left, straight, or right. Really, my opponent has no idea where I'm hitting because my paddle tip stays down and I have more control over this ball. Secondly, you want to disguise your speed ups as if you were about to hit a dink. So your body position, your backswing, everything about you should be saying the word dink, but then you actually hit a speed up. If you can get really good at disguising your speed ups, they'll be way more deceptive and way more effective as a result. And finally, something you need to be reminded of for your entire pickleball career is to shorten your follow through and quicken your reload time. So the shorter your follow through is on your speed ups, the quicker you can get back to a ready position to defend the ball that's coming back. If you take too big of a follow through or you take too much time to get back into ready position, then the ball that comes back at you, you sped it up, it's going to come back at you faster and you'll probably lose the point. This is how you can improve your control incredibly fast. This drill, we're focusing on resets, and you can just use the same targets from earlier. So all we're doing here is hitting those same speed ups that we were just hitting, but now we're also going to reset the ball gently over this mock net and into the kitchen. When you first start this drill, you might want to drop the ball, speed up, reset, and then just catch the ball and do that again. But as you get better, you can start to speed up, reset, and go in that kind of pattern. There's 3 things you can do to make these resets a lot more controlled. Here they are. Number 1 is keeping your paddle face pointed mostly towards the sky. Now, obviously you don't want it pointing straight up, but you definitely want it pointing more in that direction. The ball always follows wherever your paddle face is pointing. So if you're pointing in this direction, that's where the ball is going to go. Most people, when they're trying to reset, they have their paddle face completely flat. And because of this, the ball tends to go into the net. Or they have their paddle face pointed up, but second tip, they use way too much follow through instead of keeping it minimal. So you want to loosen your grip here and have very little follow through, and mostly let the pace from the speed up control that ball back over the net. You don't want to be adding pace to the shot, you want to be taking pace away. So a lot of times that means absorbing, and to absorb, third tip, you have to get lower with your legs and use most of your legs to absorb the shot. So it's not that I'm standing up and then using my arm to actually hit this shot, but the better approach is to keep your legs bent and have a loose wrist, and this absorbs the shot. You keep your paddle face where that ball is going to go, and then it just hits your paddle face and goes back over the net. A lot of times we try to overcomplicate resets when really they're super simple. Hey, real quick, 85% of you watching this video are not subscribed on YouTube. Now you're probably about to see an ad, so if you could please consider subscribing while that ad plays, that would be the absolute best way you could support me. Thanks. One of the biggest mistakes in pickleball is not resetting volleys when you're in this transition zone. The majority of people look to speed up the ball from this position, but when you get into a firefight from here, you're at a disadvantage. However, this reset shot is uniquely difficult to master because you have to take a lot of pace off the ball, but still get it across the net, and this requires an absurd amount of control. Here's a great drill you can try out using an Ernie pickleball machine. Place the machine a few feet off the baseline and then select number 23. Set the height to low, the speed to 70, and the spin to 4. Your goal here is to gently reset the ball over the net and into the kitchen. Make sure that you're using your legs when doing this and keep the follow through very minimal. Since we can use shot sequences on the Ernie, you can also select number 27 so that you can alternate between both forehand and backhand resets. You can use code SHEA at checkout for $100 off your Ernie. If you want to get better at hands battles, then you need to do this drill. So for this drill, you're going to need to put tape on the wall again. So just step up to the wall and then right about where your chest is, or maybe like your lower ribs, put a line of tape across about 16 inches above this line, and it can be as long as you want it to be. And then just put 3 targets along this line, one on the left, one on the middle, one on the right. Doesn't really matter where these targets are. The further out they are, the harder this drill is going to be. The closer, the easier. So to do this drill, you're just going to first start with one hit to this side, and then your next volley should be below this line and above the net. And then the second time you do the drill, it's going to go 1, 2, and then hit a ball here. And then the third time, 1, 2, 3, hit a ball here, and you continue like that, going back and forth up until you get to 10. Now, the reason this is important is because in hands battles, very often you're not actually thinking about where you're aiming, you're just trying to get the ball back. So having specific targets to aim to is going to increase your awareness in hands battles and make you a lot more effective when you get to that position. And if you ever have an advantage in a hands battle, the best way to capitalize on that position is to hit the ball down. So that's what we're practicing here. We hit one ball to a consistent target, and then the next ball we hit a winner down in this position. And then you go 1, 2, hit a winner down. Now here's a few tips for this drill. So the first tip in all of pickleball, but especially here, is you want to be making sure that you're staying low. Because a lot of the power and the quickness comes from your hips, you need to be generating a lot of power and quickness from the ground. And to do that, you have got to stay low. This is the most athletic position and will make this drill a lot easier for you. Second tip is to try to keep your paddle out in front as much as you can. These balls are going to be coming back super fast. So if you're pulling your paddle back into your body after every single shot, you're going to have a way harder time doing this drill. And the third tip is to have as little follow through as possible. So just like when you're hitting speed ups in hands battles, that ball comes back at you fast. And the quicker you can reload and get into a ready position, the more likely you're going to be to put the ball away on the next shot. If you change where you aim on your drives, you're going to win more points. Most people aim super low to the net, and that's a losing strategy. So when you aim super close to the net, very often you're going to hit the net. And the reason that people aim here is because there's going to be someone standing on the other side of the kitchen waiting to return their ball. So they feel like they have to hit the ball super perfect. But here's the reality. Most people hold their paddle with a continental grip, which makes this side of their body super, super weak. So if you were to aim your drives around somebody's right rib or like right hip area, the ball that you get back after that drive is not going to be as strong. So this is where you should be aiming your drives. So for this drill, we're going to use the same exact setup that we had before before, and all you have to do is just pick one of these targets that you've already placed. So start back from the wall like 10 feet or so, hit the ball into the wall, and then as it's coming back, that's when we're hitting our drive, and we're trying to hit it in a very specific location. Here are the 3 tips. Number 1 is make sure that you're actually seeing the ball as you hit it. It's very common to look at the ball right up until you make contact and then look forward. And at the point of contact, you're not actually looking at that ball. So make sure you're seeing that ball all the way through contact. It'll make your drives much more effective and consistent. 90% of your power is going to come from your hips and your core and your drive. So it's really important that you're utilizing these while you're hitting this shot. Don't just stand here and use a big backswing in your arm to generate the power, but instead coil up your body and then unleash when you're hitting the ball. And as a result of this, your leg's probably going to come around. So if you're hitting a forehand, you're probably going to finish with your right foot coming forward, assuming you're right-handed. And if you're hitting a backhand, you're going to finish with your left foot coming forward. And then finally, try to keep your paddle head down or slightly angled out at contact. This position is going to give you the most paddle head speed, and usually paddles are longer this direction, so it allows the ball more time to roll across your paddle and generate more spin, and as a result, more control. You can use shot peaking on your third shots to make them infinitely more effective. For this drill, we're going to use the exact same setup as before, just a simple line of tape. So the setup here is to stand several feet back from the wall, hit a ball into the wall, and then as it's coming back, you hit a third shot. Now the goal here is to have this ball peak on your side of the court and then land somewhere in this section. So remember that this wall represents the net. So even if you hit that ball a little bit high above this line, just recognize that as long as that ball is going down as it's hitting the wall, that means that the ball is peaked on your side of the court. Now, ideally, we're trying to aim into this area. So the perfect third shot would be one that hits this area as that ball is going in a downward trajectory. Now, a few tips for the third shot. Number 1, you should be locking your wrist. Remember that the ball goes wherever the paddle is facing. So if you lock your wrist, you're ensuring that your paddle is facing the right direction, and as a result, the ball goes that direction. Now, just because you lock your wrist doesn't mean that you can't generate any spin. Yes, you won't be generating as much spin as if you really brush up the side of the ball. And in fact, just a little bit of brush is okay. But for most shots, having a locked wrist is more consistent. And unless you're feeling super confident with your thirds, you should not be trying to add too much spin to them. Second tip is you want to be finishing over your dominant side shoulder. So if you're a right-handed player and you're hitting a drop with a forehand, usually you're going to be finishing over your right shoulder because you're generating true top spin this direction. If you go to the side, you might be generating more of a side spin on the ball. And if you're hitting a backhand, you also want to finish over your right shoulder rather than straight up. Your initial motion after contact should be straight, but the follow through is more over your right shoulder. If you're hitting a slicing motion, this advice doesn't really hold true. Instead, you just want to be gently poking through the ball and hitting more from low to high. The final tip on the third shots is to make sure that you're using your feet to get into position. You don't just want to be reaching for every single shot. So your footwork should be more intense here, and that's because you have more time to get yourself in the right position, so the third shot that you hit is more effective. If you want to take your dinks to the 5.0 level, then you should be doing this. So for this drill, you need 3 targets on the wall. It doesn't really matter how far apart they are from each other, but just know that the further apart they are, the harder this drill is going to be. So in this drill, we're hitting in a figure 8 pattern. The first shot you hit is going to be up the line on this tape or to the outside, and then as it comes back, you push a shot cross court by aiming at this middle piece of tape, and then that ball is going to bounce over here, and then you hit another down the line shot at this piece of tape or slightly outside of it. And then this pattern just repeats, middle, then down the line, middle, and then down the line, so on and so forth. Now, 3 tips for this drill. Number 1, you want to be using shuffle footwork. So you should not be crossing over your feet too much in this drill. Instead, you want to be shuffling side to side and keeping your hips pointing towards the wall. If you ever do cross over your feet, especially on your backhand, just make sure that you pop back to ready position the second you make that shot. The second tip is try to use as little wrist as possible. Once again, ball goes where your paddle face is facing. So you just need to get behind the ball, pointing in that direction, and then use your hips and your arm to hit the shot, and not so much your wrist flicking the ball or going through the ball. And the final tip is to think about these down the line shots as lifting, so you're hitting with a little pace, but more so going over the net. And then these middle shots as push dinks that you're hitting with pace and trying to be aggressive on. You'll find that it rarely makes sense to hit a push dink down the line or to hit a lift dink cross court. Usually you want to be defensive down the line and offensive cross court. If you want even more content like this, sign up for my free newsletter where I give away a paddle every single week, plus more tips just like this. And if you made it this far into the video, please consider subscribing, and YouTube really thinks that you're going to like this video next. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.